good night, whatever it is for you right now. Hello, hello. Welcome. I see people pouring in. My name is Juan Gonzalo Iwasaki. I am the academic coordinator for Peru and the Andean Zone. It is a pleasure to have you all here. By the way, hello, not only the people in Zoom, but also hello to the people watching us on Facebook right now, watching us on LinkedIn. It's very, very nice to have you here. All right. So I have a question for you before we start with the webinar. Tell me, what is the most beautiful thing you have near you right now? Could be in the room, could be right outside the room. What is the most beautiful thing that you have? For example, in my case, I have a case I got as a present from our Macmillan Argentina team when I went to visit recently. So let us know in the chat, what is the most beautiful thing that you have around?
Sorry, Juan, just sorry to interrupt, just to let you know that we're just activating the chat now. It'll be, people can chat in a minute, but you won't see any messages there just yet. Just give us about 30 seconds or so.
All right, no problem, no problem. Okay, but that gives you time to think about or to look around for the things, beautiful things that you have around you, so that you can answer as soon as the chat is activated. All right, so hello, hello. Your wife, Mark. All right, very good, very good. The chat is a go. A mirror, okay. That's good self-esteem. Your cats, pictures from your kids. Hello from Veracruz. Hello, hello. Your rainbow pencil case. That's very nice. A baguette. You're gonna get me hungry. It's 8:54 in the morning here. I need my breakfast. So, your son. Oh, that's so sweet. All right. Hello from Peru. I saw there. Hello, Deborah. Your son. Your tea is very good. I wonder. There you are. Somebody mentioned coffee. So we're fighting between tea and coffee now. All right. So for those of you logging on right now, my question was, what's the most beautiful thing that you have nearby? Right. In my case, I have a beautiful case from Macmillan, Argentina, that I got as a gift. A map of India. Yeah, India is a very nice country. Your kid, Sophia, oh, so sweet. Your daughter, Cat, a ginger biscuit. Oh, goodness. Toys. All right. Hello, everybody. An iPhone with lots of memories. All right. Your coffee. Okay, somebody's very excited about coffee. All right. Yes, coffee is very important for a lot of teachers, right? All right. So who's excited about day 7 of our Global Teachers Festival? Yes? Oh, the photo for your family. So tell me, yeah, all right, Sonia's excited. So, a couple people are very excited. That's good. All right. So today we are going to start with day 7 of our Global Teachers Festival. All right. Welcome to day number 7. I hope that you have attended as many as the previous 6 days as you could. There have been some amazing talks, some amazing moments. And thank you for your questions, because every session is slightly different, even when it's with the same presenters, because we look at what you guys are saying. So let's get this started. First, remember to subscribe to our events in general. If you want to subscribe to our events in general, you can subscribe here in macmillanenglish.com/ALAP. That stands for the Advancing Learning Academic Program. We have a ton of webinars, blogs, over 100 articles. We have a lot of things. So please do go there. You can subscribe. You can also use your camera. Somebody mentioned they had an iPhone nearby with pictures. So you can use that to scan this and go and subscribe, and don't miss any of our training sessions. So I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to be able to do that. And specifically, if you want to register for the 3 remaining days of the Global Teachers Festival, you can do so here at macmillanenglish.com/GTF, which stands for the Global Teachers Festival, right? So if you haven't registered for the talks on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, go ahead and do that. Now, remember, then in maximum a week's time, you will receive your certificate in the mail, and also your virtual goodie bag if you're attending today. So if you're listening to me, probably. Remember, please, if you're attending through Facebook or LinkedIn, do register for Zoom next time so that you can also receive your certificate and your virtual goodie bag. So how many certificates have you received so far? I know there's a couple that have gone out already. All right. Now, today, we're going to have two amazing talks. We're going to have Overcoming Learner Fatigue Through Creativity by Nik Peachey, and we're going to have Reflections on Leading a Global Network of Language Schools in Uncertain Times by Lucy Horsefield. So if you're working in management, etc., do stick around after the awesome talk from Nik for Lucy's talk as well. Now, first, let's talk about Nik a little bit. He has worked all over the world training teachers and developing innovative and creative products, right? He has been awarded twice by the British Council Innovations, and he has been shortlisted 6 different times. Look at that. And recently, his most recent project, he worked for 2 years as a pedagogical manager for an online school, 100% online school. So if right now you're still working online after the pandemic, he's going to have some very interesting things to say, right? Delivering language learning remotely for students in Brazil, all right? He's also the head of content development for Eton X at a 100% online school owned by Eton College, and a content developer for an English and interfaith dialogue course designed for the British Council and Al-Azhar University in Cairo. Interfaith dialogue, how important is that in our world nowadays with all the things going on? So without further ado, you're here to see Nik, you're not here to see me. So Nik, welcome.
Hi there, everybody.
Hello, hello. It's very nice to see you. It's very nice.
Hi,
Thank
Ron.
you for your time. 3 sessions in one day, that's a ton. So have a great session. I'm sure it'll be awesome.
Thanks. Thank you for that introduction. And apologies for any of you who are expecting a longer beard or color. I'm in black and white today. Okay, just got to make a quick adjustment. So that I'm at the beginning of my presentation and not the end of it. Okay, that's good. See if I can get it full screen. Okay. Hi everybody. I just want to get chat open so I can see what anybody's saying. And okay, that's open for everyone. Great, good. Hi, great to have so many people here and so many people from all over the world. It's always amazes me the power of technology to enable us to connect over such a vast amount of people over such a wide space. That's great. And okay. So my session today is on overcoming learner fatigue through creativity. I admit creativity isn't the only way to overcome learner fatigue, but it's a way that I like to use and something that I've put a lot of time into trying to develop. There's a little bit of introduction to myself. I don't think I need much introduction. I've had one already. There's some images of my Elton Awards just to sort of boost my credibility a little bit. And along the bottom of this slide, there are links to my social media presence and the kinds of things that I share free online. So if you want to follow me later or check things out later, do click through those. I'll be giving you a link and at the end, which gives you access to the whole of this presentation. So you'll be able to go through it again, check out all the links and all the buttons that I show you. So don't worry too much about making notes. But if you're a note taker and you like to make notes, then by all means do. But be sure you will get the link to the presentation at the end. Also, if you like to doodle, by all means, doodle away. I highly recommend that. Or if you like to sketch while you're doing this, that's what it's all about. Okay, so sit back, relax, and we'll try a few things out and try and enjoy the session. The first thing about to look at is learner fatigue. Is it a fact that our learners get tired? It's something that happens every day, but it's also something that happens at a specific point, in their learning journey, often around the intermediate plateau. So why is it? Why does that happen? I've got a quick questionnaire for you. I've done this with the previous group, so you might already see some answers. But if you scan the QR code here, there's a quick questionnaire, and the question is, Why is it? Why do learners get fatigued? And I'm thinking specifically at this kind of intermediate plateau that many students seem to arrive at. I'll give you a couple of minutes to sort of scan that and to put your answers in, and then we'll have a look at what everyone has to say. Okay, hopefully you've had a chance to scan the code. Good to see someone here from Morocco. Used to live in Morocco. Lovely place. Same format of lessons, not becoming proficient in a short time. When they reach teenagerdom, they feel they aren't making progress and start to lose enthusiasm. Yeah, it's easy to be enthusiastic when you first start learning a language, isn't it? But as you learn more and more, you get to this point where it becomes much more difficult. Repetition, predictability, information overload, busy schedules, multitasking. Yeah, lots and lots of different reasons. Too much homework, that's an interesting one. Okay, so for me, I think one of the things that we can do to help keep language learning interesting and keep students moving forward and help them to internalize it a lot more is to use things that are to try to develop students' creativity and be more creative about the way they learn. So the rest of the presentation will look at sort of the creative process and how I think you can apply that within a course book. We'll use Language Hub as an example and take some examples from Language Hub. You could apply these ideas to your own course book, whatever one you're using though, and we'll see how that goes. So, for one thing, why creativity? And I think, I've got a few different answers here. You can type yours into the chat as well if you want to. I think, primarily, communication is a creative process. When we engage with a real person and we're having a conversation, we can't pre-plan that. We can't just have a set of utterances that we use regardless of what the other person says. We're forced to negotiate communication with them, to respond to them spontaneously, and to be creative in the way that we do that. And so practicing creativity with language helps students to do that. I think creativity is also part of self-expression. It gives students the chance to use the language to express themselves and to say something about themselves. And I think that's very important if you want students to own the language. I know so many students who, they're forced to study this subject and they always keep it kind of at arm's length and it doesn't become internalized for them. Using creativity and self-expression can help the language become part of their soul, if you like. I think creativity is also life enhancing. As somebody who studied music myself, studied writing and photography as well, those kinds of creativity have made my life better. And I think, that's important too. And, and making people more personally fulfilled as well. Employability, I think, is an interesting one. It's interesting that the World Economic Forum cites creativity as being one of the number 3 in the top 10 of skills that you need in order to ensure you'll be employable in the next 10 years. I mean, I'm not sure if they've revised that after seeing ChatGPT or not, but I'll come back to that point later. And also creativity, or the process of creating, helps students understand the problem-solving process. And so it can enhance their ability to solve and deal with different problems. And we'll go into that again in a minute. And I think that's very important because life is like that. We have lots of problems. Certainly mine is. Okay, so that's a little bit of why. I'd like to have a quick look at the creative process, and I know that some people feel that creativity is something you've either got or you haven't. It's like a talent. You're either a brilliant painter or you're not. You're either a great musician or you're not. You're kind of born that way. And I have to say, I contest that. I think that's rubbish. I actually, as a musician, I was a very bad musician for a long time until I learned to think in a different way and to learn about the processes involved and learn technique. And now I'm a competent musician, but that's taken a lot of work. Lots of people talk about this idea of 10,000 hours. And I don't believe in the 10,000 hours, but I do believe, in hard work and, to be really good at anything, takes a long time. Picasso may well have had a marvelous talent for painting, but he developed that talent and worked at it constantly. And I think, if we understand the process of creativity, then we can start to develop those abilities. And what you can see on the slide at the moment, or at least I hope you can see it, is 7 steps to creative thinking. And this is based around sort of problem solving. When you get this infographic, you'll be able to look more clearly. And if you just click on these little buttons, you'll be able to see a bit more explanation. And I think one of the first things we need to do to be creative or to fulfill a creative task is to understand the task. What's the challenge? What do we need to achieve? Who will it impact? Those kinds of things. So we go through this process of understanding the challenge, finding out more about the challenge, and then looking for solutions. And the looking for solutions part is usually brainstorming, brainstorming lots and lots of different ideas that might be possible. Trying to think outside the box and not exclude anything, but trying to think for lots of different ideas. And that's the divergent part of the creative process, the divergent thinking part. And then there's the opposite, there's this convergent thinking process where we take all those ideas and we take each one individually and examine it in detail. We pick it apart and research it more and look in more detail at it. Maybe it's something we throw away, and maybe it's something we keep. So that's the convergent thinking part. And then we can try and combine ideas. We can take 2 of those ideas and knock them together and see if we can make something new with them. So, that's the next part of the process. And once we come up with our idea and select our idea, we plan it and show our plans to someone, and we get feedback on it. So we get some feedback before we go to the creative through the creative part, the creation part. Sorry, we reflect on that feedback because gathering feedback is important, getting people's input is important, but we don't want to take everything everybody says and make all those kinds of changes. We need to evaluate what's good feedback, what feedback we can use and apply, and what feedback we can't use and apply. So we apply some analysis to that feedback and reflect on it. And lastly, that's where we get to the stage where we create and produce something. And I think it's worth thinking about that process and working with students on that process when you do creative tasks with them. And there's a great example. Language Hub has in each unit, they have what's called the speaking hub, and they have kind of like these little mini projects. And I think it's great to use that type of thinking with these mini projects and go through that process with students so that we can sort of show them that, you don't just sit down and do something instantly. You don't just sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write a story and write it. There's a process there, a planning process and a sort of whole thinking process. So I think that's sort of an important part of creativity. It doesn't just happen in a flash. Okay, I'm going to give you a quick test to see whether you were listening there. On my screen, I have 2 little diagrams as part of this thinking process. And there's a green part and a red part, which represent convergent and divergent thinking. And I want to know which one is the divergent thinking. Is it green or is it red? I'll give you a couple of minutes to type in. Divergent thinking, is it the green diagram or the red one? Okay, lots of answers there. That's great. Okay, those of you that said red, that's a magnificent answer, but it's not correct. The correct answer is green. In fact, so green is the divergent thinking one. It's thinking widely, as widely as possible, coming up with as many ideas as possible. And then red is the convergent one, where we start to narrow those ideas down, dismiss some, throw some out until we come to the best idea or ideas that we think we have. So green is divergent, red is convergent. Green is thinking widely and without judgment and thinking about quantity. Convergent is analyzing, being judgmental, being selective, and looking for quality. Both of these are important parts of the creative process. Some people say that they're better creative or better convergent or divergent thinkers, but all of us can do all of them, really. It's about separating those processes. And it is important to separate those processes because convergent thinking, where we start to analyze and judge things, can stop us from doing the divergent thinking. It's important when we're doing divergent thinking, doing exercises like brainstorming, that we think widely and selectively, unselectively, come up with as many ideas as possible and don't engage the judgmental side of our brain. I've worked in companies and staff rooms where people have tried to brainstorm, and all you need is one person who's being judgmental of those ideas during the brainstorming process, and it stops. It completely closes down people's ideas. So when you have brainstorming, use a time limit. So it's 5 minutes. Have a big goal, as many ideas as possible, and make sure nobody's being judgmental. Focus on quantity. Okay, so those are my tips for brainstorming. Now we're going to have a look at a few ideas for divergent thinking that you can apply, and then we'll look at some for convergent thinking. So these are some of the brainstorming activities, the divergent thinking activities. And, we'll start off with probably one of the most common ones, which is sort of brainstorming. If you're starting a unit of a book and usually it's on a theme like sport or art or something like that, start off with, brainstorming vocabulary and get students to brainstorm as many words as possible. I try to aim for something like 30 words in 5 minutes or something like that. Any words that they can think of that are connected with the topic. You can even get them to mix in words from their L1 if you want to, and don't worry, they can translate them later, or they can learn them or teach each other later. But get as many as possible, brainstorm the topic. That's always a good way to start a lesson and start a new topic. Another way that you can help to develop students' ability to brainstorm is to give them brainstorming warmers. And I think this is my second idea is a way of getting students to sort of develop their brainstorming capabilities and come up with ideas. And all you have to do is give them a simple idea to brainstorm solutions for. So, for example, think of ways you can collect water when it rains. Get students to brainstorm as many ways as possible of collecting water. They can collect it with their hands, they can turn an umbrella upside down, they can use their socks, they can use a cup, they can use a newspaper, as many ideas, and try and go for as many creative ideas, not just the easy ones. They could make a bucket from sculpting newspaper, or get seashells, or chop coconuts in half and collect water. Whatever they can do, as many ideas as possible. Could be as many ways to cook an egg as possible. How many ways can you cook an egg without a cooker? Put it in the sun, put it in your boiling kettle or something like that. How many ways to cross a river without getting wet? Just think of little problems like that for them to solve and come up with lots of different ideas. If you want to sort of think about, and again, go through that creative thinking process, those whole 7 steps with something more complex, you can give them some more difficult problems, like solving the problems of the world. So how can we end the problems of pollution? And you can get them to sort of go through that process of thinking, researching the problem, thinking of as many ideas as possible, analysing those ideas to see which ones can work, getting feedback, selecting, rejecting, and then sort of actually coming up with a presentation of their best idea. So you can take them through that whole process with one of these problems. And that's quite simple, a great way to develop their creativity. But it all starts with sort of brainstorming ideas. So different ways of fixing the world. So those are a few kind of brainstorming warmers that you could try. This is another idea that I like. I mean, I like using quotes in the materials that I write for students. Don't know if you like using sort of famous quotes, but a nice idea is to grab a quote and then take a word out of it and get students to brainstorm as many words as possible that can go into that quote. Be sure not to focus them. Don't try to get them to guess the correct one. Try to get them to guess the most interesting one. What's the most interesting way you could fulfill that quote? For me, if there's no struggle, then there is no chocolate, because chocolate is the reward for struggle. I'll give you a couple of minutes just to sort of type some in. I can see lots coming in. I actually grabbed this quote from one of the pages of Language Hub. At the beginning of each unit, they start with a quote which relates to the unit, and which I thought was really nice. So you can sort of grab the first quote from each unit and just sort of cross out a word and get students to brainstorm what the missing word is. And in this case, it was progress. That's a quote from Frederick Douglass. But I think quotes are great, and you can easily find lots of them on the internet. Just write them down, take a word out, and get students to brainstorm as many ways as possible of fulfilling it. And then they can vote on the one they like the best. Doesn't have to be the correct one. It should be the one they like best. I've got another little brainstormer here, and this one's based around sort of doing difficult things. There's a picture of someone up a mountain. They're climbing a mountain. For me, this is kind of my nightmare scenario. I hate high places. So, we start with, let's climb a mountain. How many ways can you think of to persuade me to climb a mountain? You can type those in if you want to. What ways can you think of to persuade me to climb a mountain? And that's another activity you can get your students to do. Brainstorm as many reasons as possible why someone would climb the mountain. We've got nice scenery. To lose weight? Oh yeah, I could do that. Bribery, yes, money. Chocolate, yeah, chocolate might do it, but I have a terrible fear of heights, so it's probably not the one for me. So, again, course books are full of these kinds of images, so let's sort of use them. I grabbed this one from the front page of Language Hub from the Unit 7 on extremes, and it's a good way just to sort of get students brainstorming before they start the unit and thinking more about that topic. I actually have a kind of whole collection of things here and of images of extreme sports and things like that. It's a popular topic in many course books, and and you can actually use a structure for this. So would you do it if, and you can put students in pairs then to sort of brainstorm with each other. Would you do it if? They take it in turns to think of ways to persuade the other one. Would you do it if I gave you £10,000? Would you do it if your life depended on it? Would you do it if, So again, a nice way to sort of get students brainstorming and use a specific language structure for that if you want to. So those are some sort of different images. See, this one would be my worst one, the tightrope walk. I'd just have to jump off. I couldn't do that. I couldn't do the bungee jump either. Might do the motorcycle jump if it wasn't too big. I think I'd be doing the haunted house. Okay, so those were some ideas for divergent thinking and getting students brainstorming. Now I want to look at some sort of convergent thinking, and that kinds of looks into analyzing things in more depth and making connections between different ideas and grouping. These are kind of convergent thinking skills, looking for relationships between things. So these are kind of some of our convergent thinking skills, getting students to research more deeply, evaluate, think more critically, looking for commonalities and connections. Okay, so here's some ideas for convergent thinking. One of my favorites is this idea of portmanteau words. You know, portmanteau words are very common in English, and it's sort of growing all the time. There are new words coming out all the time, like brunch, combination of breakfast and lunch, mansplaining, when a man explains something to a woman that she already knows. And so we can use this thing to help our students revise their vocabulary. So if you've learned sort of 30 new words this term, if you've studied 30 new words with your students, get them to collect all these 30 words together and mix them to see if they can make new portmanteau words. See how many they can make by connecting the different words together. This is a great activity because, you know, it gets them to think about the different words and their meanings. It gets them to think about how they'd spell the new words, which part would they take. Like when we have chocoholic, we take the choc and the holic from alcoholic. So how do you decide which parts of the word carry the meaning? You know, and they have to think about what it would be pronounced like. What would the new pronunciation of the word be like? You know, who decided that it was mansplaining rather than mansplaining? You know, those are good things to get students thinking about, and they think about the concepts of the words when they join them together. So that's I've got an example of some words. These aren't ones to use for your students, but there's an article that was written about different new words that are appearing. For example, this one I like, ambitious, the desire to become a better bitch. We'll miss that one. Texpectation, when you're expecting a text to arrive. And then there's chairdrobe, which is like a combination of a chair and a wardrobe. So instead of putting your clothes back in the wardrobe, you just throw them on a chair. So I think those are some nice examples of portmanteau words. I've put the link to that into the chat there. So another idea sort of based on this combining stuff is to take two different stories that your students know and try and combine them into one. For example, you know, Titanic and Frozen, we both know the stories of them, but how would you combine them into one story? What sort of things would you combine? You know, would you have Elsa, the magic, the wizard or witch or whatever she is? You know, she would be the heroine, or would she be the nasty person creating the iceberg that blocks the ship? You know, get students to rethink how they could combine characters and plots between these two films or two books or two stories and make something new. There was a real trend of this, you know, about 5 or 6 years ago, I think it was, where lots of writers were combining, you know, literary classics with zombies. Like there was a zombies version of The Pride and the Prejudice, or a zombies version of Jane Eyre. And you could try something like that, but you know, I'm not sure if not everybody's into zombies. But taking two stories that students already know and combining them together is a nice way to get them to be creative. And you know, there's less actual creating for them. You know, they know the two stories already, so they can, you know, make something useful from the two of them without having to start something from scratch and be totally original. So I think that's a nice way to get students being creative. These are some ideas for grouping and connecting, and I think odd word out is something that we often do with students. We give them 4 words and we say which is the odd one out, and it's always something like, oh well, that one's got a different pronunciation pattern, or that one's a verb and the other one's a nouns, or the syllable stress is different for this one. But we can look at that a different way and get students to invent the reason why one word is the odd word out, so that there isn't a correct answer. So for example, I've got 4 words here: spotty, music, carrying, and laughter. So try and invent a reason why one of those is the odd word out, and just type it in. Just choose one. It mustn't be linguistic though. Just choose one word and type in, why is it the odd word out? You have to say why. One is an adjective, is a very bad explanation. You have to try and think outside the box a little bit. So, for example, you could say that music is the odd word out because it's the only one that is beautiful. Or carrying is the odd word out, or no, spotty is the only odd word out because it's the only one you can't hear. What's the reason? What's the reason for making them the odd word out? And get students to think creatively about this. There's no right or wrong answer, but just get them to think creatively. Another way of approaching that is what I call word buckets, so that we can get students grouping words. So you get students to collect together all the words they've learned. So they've learned 30 different new words this term. Get them to put them into 4 buckets, organize them into 4 groups, but they have to decide what the rationale for the grouping is. They come up with it themselves. Okay, so I've given an example. For example, my 4 buckets are red words, so they're words that I associate with the color red; sad words that I think are sad; words that I like; and words I don't think I use much. So I can group all my 30 words into those 4 different buckets. And again, it's important that you let your students decide what the grouping is. There's no correct or incorrect grouping. They just decide, okay? And it gets them thinking about the different words, the relationships between the words, and just sort of thinking about the concepts again. So that's a great way to do sort of mass vocabulary revision. Okay, hope you like that idea. Again, we can work with images. If you've got images in your book, images of different objects, and get students to invent something new by combining those 2 images. Okay, so we've got an image of some headphones and a bowl. What could we invent using these 2 different images? Get students to invent something. You can suggest something now. Interestingly, going back to I mentioned ChatGPT earlier, I asked it this question. I said, what can you invent if you combine headphones with a bowl? And it said nothing. These 2 objects are incompatible. Whereas we as people can start imagining and creating new things from them. A helmet, a musical helmet, a musical bowl, so lots of different ideas. And again, you can collect images of any two objects from your course book, or just flashcards, or find them online, and get students thinking about what new things they can make from them. Again, I'll show you a few examples of some really nice inventions. Again, this is something that I found online, and these are ideas. There's 25 here. I'll share the link with you as well. So the first one, which I really like, no, I don't want, is a combination of an ironing board and a mirror. So you iron on one side and then you turn it over and you can look at yourself in the mirror. Really useful. There's one here that's it takes the roll top desk and combines it with a bench, and you can turn it so that you don't have to sit on the wet part. An egg timer combined with the traffic light. And of course, the favorite one for most teachers, which is word search wrapping paper. So instead of wasting that wrapping paper, you have a word search on it and you can use it to improve your vocabulary. Always the favorite one with teachers. Wouldn't you just love a present with word search paper on? I'll share the link to that with you. So those are some kind of mash-up ideas, combining things together. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but if we think about one of the most important inventions of the last millennium, the printing press was invented by combining together the coin press and the grape press for making wine. They combined those together, came up with the printing press. That's how many great innovations are created. Okay, one of the other things that I really like to do to help students with develop creativity is to sort of look at the way we use the senses. And the first one is sort of the inner sense, the inner eye, and using visualization. And this is something that we can try now. Visualization involves just closing your eyes, get all of your students to close their eyes, sit silently, and try to visualize something in their mind. Okay, so for example, let's try this now. So close your eyes. I'll still be here when you open them again. Close your eyes and try to visualize as I tell you what to visualize. So think about the last meal you had. Think about your last meal. Think about how it looked on the plate. Try to imagine it. And now try to remember who was around you when you ate that meal. What was happening around you? What other people were there? When you ate the meal, what part of it did you start with? What was your first spoonful or forkful? Were you using a knife and fork or chopsticks or your fingers? No. How did it feel in your mouth when you were chewing it? What was the flavor like? Can you try and visualize how that felt? What it tasted like? Okay. Which part of the meal did you leave till last? What was the last thing on your plate? Did you eat everything? Or was there something left on your plate when you'd finished? How did your stomach feel when you'd finished? What did you do afterwards? Okay, so you go through that visualization with your students, and then you tell them, open your eyes now, and then they can talk together in pairs about what their meal. So they can, in doing it, the visualization this way, they've had time to sort of prepare what they're going to say, and they're thinking about all those things before they start the speaking activity. So when they go to the speaking activity, they're much better prepared for it in that way, because they've thought about lots of the ideas already. So they already know what they need to say. You can do a similar thing with maybe the last film you saw or something like that. Go get them to try and imagine and remember the last film they saw. Another thing you can do is use a text, a text from a course book. Get them to remember, get them to close their eyes, and then you read them the text from the course book, and they try to visualize it as they hear it. And that helps them to prepare for actually reading the text themselves. Something else that I like to do is sort of engage with taste and smell. And I think if you have a picture in your course book, try to get students to imagine they are there, they're in the picture, and they have to try to imagine what can they smell. So look at this picture, for example. Imagine you're there. What kinds of smells can you smell as you move around the picture? What different things can you smell? And again, it sort of engages their senses and makes it a much more personal journey into that image. And again, you can do this with almost any image that you have in your course book. It's great travel ones like this, but you can do it with almost anything. And then they can tell you, what could I smell? And they're linking the smells then to the vocabulary and the things that they're seeing and making it part of that experience. Another way you can use this, again, to revise vocabulary is to get those vocabulary words they've learned and think about trying to apply a flavor to each word. Which different flavors are different words? So, for example, what flavor is music? Is it sweet or is it sour? Is it savory? Is it spicy? Or it could be, you could apply different flavors of fruit to the different words. Which flavor of fruit is it? And doing these things and adding them to their vocabulary records might help them remember those different words and add another element to them. I'm running pretty short on time, so I'll try and push on. Another activity that I like is sketching sentences. Actually get students to sketch out a sentence instead of just writing it down. Add a sketch to go with it and see if they can remember those sentences using the sketch. We often, in grammar, when we're learning grammar, we give students example sentences. And if they sketch it out, they think much more about the concept. And there's a great website here called Sketchplanations, which has a whole collection of these kind of sketched out concepts here. I've just put that into chat for you. And so these are sketches of different concepts or words. Snubbing people, I like this one, fubbing, combination of snubbing and using your phone. So, get students actually sketching sentences. And again, if you remember, I said about sort of reading a text or a listening activity before they actually do the comprehension questions. You can, as a comprehension activity, you can actually get them to read and create a sketch of what they understand from the text. It doesn't have to be a beautiful sketch. They just have to make a sketch of anything they understand from the text that they're reading. And I think that's a great way to sort of actually find out, what students are really understanding from a text, because often we use comprehension questions and we only get, we only find out whether it's the right or the wrong answer. We find out whether they know the answers to the questions or what they don't understand. We don't find out what they do understand. And I think getting them to sketch their comprehension of a text is a nice way to do that. I like to try and use music and sound with students, sound particularly, and a nice activity that I like is an activity called song sentence revision. And we'll try this. Just think of a song that you really like. Type in the name of the song that you really like to the chat. Song that you really like. Okay, so once my students have thought of the song that they really like, I give them their example sentence that I'm trying to get them to learn, and I ask them to sing the sentence to the tune of that song. So, for example, my example sentence is going to be, I've been to Paris, but I haven't been to Rome. I've been to Paris, but I haven't been to Rome. So now try to sing that sentence to the tune of the song that you like. And as you do that, you'll find you're thinking about the different way, the number of syllables, how that fits into the song, how you emphasize different words, how you pronounce different words within the song, and that's a great one, I think, to get students thinking about how things are pronounced, how they can fit and how they fit around songs. And it also helps them maybe to remember those example sentences. And it's a kind of way of drilling them, internally drilling them, using a tune that they like as well. So, that's an activity that I like very much. Whenever I do this activity, I always think of Madonna's Like a Virgin, although that isn't one of my favorite songs, but, and try to sing I've been to Paris, but I haven't been to Rome using that. that tune. Another of the things that we can do to get our students thinking, to make our students a bit more externally aware and get them listening more, or at least listening to the world, is to get them to collect sounds. And I know that most of our students these days have one of these phones that they carry around everywhere, and these have a very good microphone on them, and they're very good for recording. So one thing that you can do is you can give them a list of times each day. So maybe 2 p.m., 5 p.m., 10 a.m., 9 p.m. Give them those list of times and tell them wherever they are at those times to stop and record on their phone whatever they can hear, but just for 3 or 4 seconds, just to do a short 3 or 4 second audio recording on their phone. And then they bring those recordings to the next lesson and they play them to get to each other and tell them what they were doing and what they could hear. So, you know, here's me. I was sitting in a coffee shop. You can hear the barista making coffee. You can hear a few people talking, things like that. And also that's a great way of practicing past continuous if you want to. So at 4 o'clock, I was having coffee and I was listening to this. So, you know, get students exploring the world, using their phones to explore the world a little bit more instead of just sort of becoming introverted and narcissistic through their phones. And you know, a great way to sort of start the lesson, getting them talking and doing some language practice. You can do the same thing by getting them to collect 5 random images. Again, give them specific times, tell them wherever you are at this time, stop and take a photo of something. It shouldn't be yourself or another person. It should be something that you can see that's around you. Then next lesson, they come in, they show each other the photos, tell each other what they were doing and where they found this thing and compare them. And it's a way of getting them to look at the world a bit more, to notice things and to sort of practice some speaking in a creative way. You could make it something specific. You could sort of tell them to research specific images. So take 5 pictures of people's ears, and then in the lesson they can tell you whose ear it is and what they know about the person. Or 5 things that are triangular. Just take five pictures of anything that's triangular. So, you know, doing image research and using their phones to look outwards. Last one, promise, I'm almost finished. And this is one that involves a lot of sentences, and this is the pain gain map. This is something I called a pain gain map. And basically what you do, you take an image from your course book and you get the students to think about that person. And you think about what the person's gains are. What are their hopes? What are their dreams? What do they want from their life? You know, what motivates them? And you write them on one side. And then on the other side, you think of their pains. What are they afraid of? What obstacles do they face? Now, what are their nightmares? What do they dread? There's some focus questions here, if this will help. And you can give them the focus questions and get them to think about that person. And this is just an image that's taken from the course book. Again, this one's from Language Hub. And this image just sort of, this activity just gets them thinking about that person as a real person and developing their empathy with that person. So, you know, that's just doing this simple pain gain map can sort of bring your course book to life and make it that much more engaging. Okay, so that's the last idea. There are some tips for making your classroom a bit more creative here, which you can read later. And I'll just show, there's the QR code. If you scan the QR code, you can open the presentation on your phone. All of the ideas will be in there. It's exactly the same presentation that I've just gone through. All the buttons are interactive. So scan that code, and I hope you enjoyed some of those ideas with your students. So sorry, that was a bit of a rush. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Nick. This has been an amazing presentation. The reactions in the chat are excellent. Everybody's thank you. Well, so very, very happy. Look at all those hearts flowing. Come on, I don't get all those hearts ever.
It's nice to see those, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is one of the first webinars where I've actually seen those being used. So that's kind of really nice. It's nice to feel the love, you know.
Instant feedback, right? So we had a couple of questions in the chat.
Sure.
There was one that I was about to answer in the chat myself. Somebody mentioned that when you were talking about the smell, right, using the smell and asking people and making connections, somebody mentioned, I think a little bit in jest, that it didn't work for her after COVID. But I think that this is an opportunity to do something like connecting things, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's connecting things to your to the senses. I mean, some people have lost their sense of smell during COVID, and maybe one day it will come. I'm sure it will eventually it will come back. But I think these senses are things that we often neglect with when teaching. We're teaching one sort of part of the body. We're just going through eyes and auditory, but those other senses are involved and can be involved in learning. I know that. For some people, they have a smell that triggers, like I used to live in Cairo, and there's a smell that I can be walking down the street and I can smell this specific smell, and I'm instantly transported back to the streets in Cairo. And I remember that so vividly and so clearly. Lots of people have those kind of smell associations, and they can be very powerful. I mean,
you could even have an activity where you describe how something smells to somebody who has never smelled anything ever, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So,
yeah.
And we had another question. Somebody asked that whether the creative process also helps learner be safer and happier in their daily lives, apart from making them learn the language itself.
I don't know about safer. Happier, I think, is creativity. I think makes people happy to express yourself. To be creative does make people happier. Safer, I don't know. Depends where you are, I think.
If you need creativity to stay safe, then maybe you're not exactly in the right place at that time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
All right, Nick, thank you very much. It has been amazing. I can see that people are very, very happy with the presentation. And I myself, I'm a fan of design thinking. Not an expert, but I'm a fan of design thinking. So this was very, very, very interesting. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And stay safe and stay creative. Bye-bye.
Excellent. Bye-bye. See you in a bit. Now, moving on today, I know that you want Nick to stay forever, but we have great things coming up as well. So first, let me share my screen again. If you liked all of the examples that Nick mentioned during his talk, remember that he is part of the team that wrote Language Hub, which is a well-balanced, it's a book for adult learners that works through connecting people through English, right? Creativity is a remedy to help with a lot of the problems that we have today. And through Language Hub, we can help students regain confidence and motivate them to learn further, right? A lot of the ideas that Nick mentioned today in the talk were taken from Language Hub, right? Now, if you want to learn more, you can learn here at macmillanenglish.com/language-hub-series. And if you're interested in Language Hub or in any other of our series, you can find in the chat right now a link, and as well as you can find here the QR code that you can scan, and you will be contacted very soon by one of our representatives in the location where you're at, so that they can give you more information or they can show you and present to you Language Hub or any other series of Macmillan that you might be interested in. So we're gonna wait here a second. The chat is in the link is in the chat. Thank you, Daria. Thank you, Will. And you also have here the QR code. All right. Now, we have two options for you for the next couple of minutes. You can stay here, and we're going to have a second talk called Reflections on Leading a Global Network of Language Schools in Uncertain Times by Lucy Horsefield. Or there is a link in the chat, or there will be a link in the chat in a second, that will take you to a course showcase for Language Hub. Here is the link in the chat. So you can go and see a showcase from Language Hub if you're interested in that book. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes for you to decide. By the way, if you are uncertain, because both options are awesome, I'm sure that all of you are interested in the talk by Lucy, and also a lot of you are interested in seeing the series, you can join us again today in the next session and do the other option, right? So you can stay here now and see Lucy, and then later see the showcase, or do it the other way around. So we're putting the link in the chat several times. All right, now that the chat has died down a little bit, let's move on. So if you're staying here with us, this is Lucy. She graduated with a degree in English literature and history from Leeds University, and she's trained as a language teacher and taught in Italy, the UK, and Australia. And now she worked in 2002, so she joined International House World Organization, right? First as a teacher in teacher recruitment, then in quality management, and then overseeing the inspection scheme for International House Global Network of Affiliated Language Schools, right? From 2009 to 2022, she was the COO, so the Chief Operating Officer, and then Managing Director of International House. So in short, Lucy was in charge during the pandemic, during these uncertain times. And the talk that we're going to have today, Lucy is going to tell us about her experience and share her knowledge, her wisdom, if you wish. Thank you, Lucy. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Juan.
So we are waiting a little bit while everybody is saying hello. Are you ready for Lucy's talk?
Hello, everybody. It's so amazing to see so many people from so many locations just whizzing through the chat.
It is incredible.
And it is absolutely incredible.
One of the things that we learned during the pandemic is that we can do these online, and it works so much better. We have so many more people as opposed to just, inviting you to Peru and just talking to like a much smaller section of people. But I'm going to take my leave. Everybody here, please enjoy Lucy's session. Thank you very much.
Can I share my, yes, I can now. You've just, so I'll just start my presentation. That's sweet. There we go. So, hello, everybody. It's quite intimidating to follow Nik Peachey, I have to say, because he just did an absolutely fantastic job. So many ideas. And my talk's a little bit different because, well, as you saw, it's talking about my reflections on leading a network of language schools during that period of great uncertainty that was COVID. I just want to stress that this isn't really a talk about being a leader or how to be a leader. I know we've got such a variety of experience and people doing lots of different roles attending this talk. So what I've tried to do is think about what I came to understand was important about leadership as a result of my experience. And also about collaboration and about teamwork, which hopefully is relevant to everybody. So I'm just going to talk very briefly about some of the changes that we all experienced in the past 3 years and what I learned from that time. And then the thing that I'm really interested in talking to you about are some of the approaches that I've learned about, particularly most recently through some studies that I've been doing that I believe can help us to sort of surf the waves of uncertainty when they come. So you heard a little bit about my background, so I won't repeat that. But I think the two things that I wanted to mention about what I did during my time at International House was, firstly, that I worked in quality management for a long time. So that involved doing lots of inspections, and I was really privileged to get to go and visit schools and go and see how they operated, and what things worked and how teams worked within schools across a variety of different situations. And that was before I then went on to be managing director. And then most recently in September 2022, I started this MSc in organizational psychology. And that's what's giving me this opportunity, I think, to really reflect back and to think about what I experienced, and then thinking and understanding a little bit more about the theories and the psychology behind what can be helpful when we're dealing with uncertainty. So that's partly what's informed this talk. And I'd just like to give a shout out to any of you that have taken MAs or MScs or you're studying at the moment, because it really has been quite a humbling experience to be back on the student side of things and learning and having to write assignments and things. I'm full of awe for anybody that has completed that process. So as I mentioned on my slide, I work for International House, and that's a network. So just to give you a bit of context, we were a network of 140 schools in 52 different countries, and they're all independently owned schools. So it wasn't that we were running the schools globally from the centre. All of the schools are individually owned and managed, but we were providing services to them, helping them. And obviously during the pandemic, that became particularly important. And primarily, International House is a language training organisation. But some of you may know IH more from teacher training. I don't know if any of you took your CELTA with International House. It'd be quite interesting to know if anybody joining us did. There's 70 International House centres around the world that deliver CELTA. I can see somebody there mentioned they did their CELTA, their Delta. So that's one of the main things that International House is known for. And it's great to see that some of you also work for International House. I can see that in the chat. So when we went into the pandemic, this was the context that we were in. So lots of schools, lots of different places. But I think the pandemic was the first time that we were all experiencing something together, something collectively. And that was, somewhat different to previous experiences where maybe something had happened in one particular country, or one particular occasion. And so, like so many of you, we went through that learning curve, conversations that we'd had many, many times previously about, how should we deliver online synchronous teaching? How should we do online training? Suddenly accelerated, and we found ourselves doing just that. And that's now become a product that I think will stay within teaching. Certainly, many schools now, having returned full-time to the classroom, are still offering that as an option. And similarly, hybrid classes, I think, again, it was something that had been experimented with. It became something that we then did as an absolute necessity. And going forward, it gives schools an extra product that they can offer, particularly if people want to attend classes when they're travelling away from work and they can't attend the school as normal. Or particularly also for study abroad. There's lots of study abroad options where students travel to a country, study intensively, and then are able to continue their studies when they return home, thanks to hybrid. And then another one that I personally didn't think I would see such acceleration and change in is online assessment. So many of our schools face this impossible situation, and I imagine this was the case with some of your students, where they were ready to take an exam and they couldn't because everything was suddenly shut down. And exam providers have now had to really accelerate their intention to make exams more available online, and to think about how they do that securely. And I think that's a shift that's really, really significant in our industry and is likely to be here to stay. And then, of course, there were the publishers who suddenly were providing online resources, for us for free and at great rates. And again, that was such a positive shift. And then lastly, virtual reality and the metaverse. And I hold my hands up. I'm somebody that was a little bit cynical about how virtual reality or VR could be used to benefit students' learning. I don't know any of you have tried to use VR in the language classroom, but I think the massive progress that we made with online teaching and being online and using technology in the classroom has really provided us with a useful step towards experimenting with these different kinds of resources. And certainly some International House schools now are doing some really interesting work where they offer a VR session as part of their program, maybe once a week, and students have the opportunity to complete problem solving tasks together. There's a lovely thing I saw where somebody was pretending they were in a spaceship. And obviously there's also the very practical usage for people learning English in particular contexts. So, working in a hotel, in a museum, all of these things where they can have the experience of actually imagining they're in that context. So I think there is some great use there for contextual learning. And what did we learn from this experience? Well, personally, I'd always believed that technology was as a tool, that we should use it to solve a problem, not just because the product was there. But it really did take us in leaps and bounds with regards to that, and also an understanding of how useful it could be in terms of actually facilitating learning, supporting learning. But I think for me, the most exciting thing about the developments in technology and the adoption that we've had in terms of technology is that it's given us this opportunity to have experiences that we couldn't otherwise have had. And as we were just discussing before this session, a conference like this, where so many people can come together and learn together and share together, it's just unthinkable a few years ago that we could have done that. And we'd had online events, but it was incredibly expensive to set up. There were limitations as to how many people could attend. And to be able to create this scenario now where so many people can join in an event so inexpensively for free is just fantastic. And also, I think it's very, very powerful in terms of inclusivity and giving people a voice. And we saw that ourselves actually as teachers sometimes in the classroom. Students that maybe face to face were more shy, were actually more comfortable in a Zoom environment. So there's all of these interesting opportunities that it provides there. So I still think we have to be cautious to use technology for technology's sake, but there are so many more options now that we have. And the other thing that I think we got more into the habit of doing during COVID, and that we should maintain, is asking our students what they need and what they want regularly, because there was so many changes and so much shifting and changing of what was happening. We had to have those dialogues really open and flowing very regularly. And I think establishing that principle is something that we want to maintain. Not that feedback and consultation with students isn't something that should just happen periodically as an end of course or parents' evening, but it should be a very ongoing conversation. And looking at your competition and seeing what they do well. Suddenly we had to look outside of what we were familiar with and think, well, actually, those people that perhaps we don't share the same methodology or the same approach, but actually they're doing pretty well at delivering their asynchronous courses, or what can we see that they're doing well that we can learn from? And finally, I think now it's about not being everything to everyone, about identifying what can be effective, what we believe in, what we have seen and proven to be correct and evidence-based, and making sure that we continue to do that well and not being too distracted by trying to cover every possible scenario. And that's also a challenge, I think, now as we return to face-to-face and thinking what we'll maintain from the online. By far, the biggest thing that I learned was the strength of a network and the strength of collaborative teamwork. And that's what I've been looking at also on my MSc, and what I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about today and discuss how we can build that. Are any of you familiar with this acronym VUCA? If you are, if you know what VUCA stands for, if you know what the letters in VUCA stand for, please could you put them in the chat? Does anybody know what VUCA stands for? At the moment, nobody's familiar with this one. It's a way of talking about the world, about vulnerability. That's a good one. I've just seen there for V. Uncertain, yes. Well, there we go. Helen's got it there. So it's volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. This is a term that was used actually, first of all, by the military when they were describing how they had to adapt their approaches to reflect the 21st century situations that they found themselves in, that things had no longer were the familiar and predictable scenarios that they were used to, and that everything had become much more complex. And I think the pandemic is a very good example of a VUCA situation, which for the first time, so many people were united in this experience. And I mean, certainly for me in my lifetime, it was the most extreme scenario in terms of navigating that in business, in work, and also obviously in our personal lives. I know for some of you may feel that you've experienced that, sadly, far more before as well, because in certain countries, sadly, people are living through very volatile, difficult and uncertain times. So I'm also conscious of the fact that that wasn't limited to the pandemic. But it's something that helps us when we're thinking about collaboration, when we're thinking about leadership. It's helpful to think about it in these terms, in this scenario, and that's really what I'm reflecting on. So if we accept that, that these are a constant, these are things that we are generally facing nowadays, what kind of problems does that present us with? And I came across this wonderful term on my course. A professor called Keith Grint wrote about this: wicked problems. So these are problems where there's no right or wrong answer. There's no clear solution. No one person has the answer, because probably there isn't a final answer. There's not a solution that will work in every scenario. What we're dealing with is completely unprecedented situations. And what Keith Grint said is that in a VUCA world, when we're often facing these wicked problems, we have to think about the kind of leadership that's appropriate for dealing with them. And what he suggested is that what we need in that situation is collective intelligence, not individual genius. Now, for me, that really spoke to me when I first read that. And I hope that it does for you from your experiences. And certainly it reflects what I think I learned during the pandemic and what I learned about leadership and collaboration. And that is essentially that leaders don't hold all the answers, whether we're talking about you as being a leader of a team or a director of studies or a manager, or even as a teacher in the classroom. You know, you're showing leadership in that situation. We don't have all of the answers. What we need to do is to ask the questions and to create a situation where people can come together and to innovate and co-create those solutions. So the premise is that in high levels of uncertainty, there's a greater need for collaboration. And that in that scenario, what we need is collaborative leadership. So that means that we look and think about how we can maintain and expand our networks, how we can engage with people, how we can engage with other people. Also that we're very wary of groupthink, that we think about talking to people outside of our normal circle. We're reaching out. We're not just talking to people that think the same as us. And we're open-minded and curious about new approaches, new ideas, new ways of doing things. And I think as teachers, we're actually really fortunate because that is generally our approach. Certainly my experience of teachers, it is. But I think it's worth thinking about how we achieve that both inside the classroom, but also outside the classroom, within the school, within the team that is your fellow teaching team, within the management team, and within the people that you work with. So I just want to share with you a couple of things that I've learned about how teams can perform well and ultimately have this collaboration, and how leaders can develop their teams to be collaborative. And the first thing that I found really exciting was this research by someone called Alex Pentland. And he literally went into different situations and measured the way that people communicated with each other, the way that the teams interacted. And it might not surprise you to hear that what he found was most important was communication. So the energy with which people communicated, the way they engaged with each other, the way they explored things together as a team. And on the screen now, you can see an example of a team that wasn't performing as well as it might have done. There was a really mixed levels of engagement. The engagement was uneven, as you can see. There's some dominant team members in terms of communication up to the top right of that diagram, and then some members of the team that aren't having as much interaction. And what he found was that when they worked with teams to change the team communication so that there was this high level of energy and engagement across team communication, the performance of the team was much better and they achieved things much quicker and they worked much more effectively together. And a little point that I found really interesting was that he found that just by changing it so that in a call center, for example, people had their coffee break at the same time rather than staggered, so they had that social interaction together, that made a significant difference to the quality of their communication. So I was thinking about this in the context of a staff room or in a language school. So, and this might be something that you would recognize. And certainly it's been the case, for me, many, many years ago when I was a teacher, it's quite easy to have a situation, particularly now we're all working so much more flexibly and remotely, where sometimes communication might be more effective between some members of the teaching team and the DOS, but not so much others. And so what I would suggest to anybody that's trying to build real strong collaboration is that in their team is that we should be striving for this, to think about ways to engage everybody to ensure that communication is happening across the team. Similarly, if we think about the different roles that there are in a language school, so we might have the management, we might have finance, admin, sales and director of studies, for example. Again, ensuring that the channels of communication and engagement are working across everybody. And making these changes can really have a very powerful effect in ensuring that communication is good and communication is effective. And the other area that I wanted to talk to you about, because I found this so exciting when I first heard about it, was some research that Google did into successful teams. And they found that who is on a team matters less than how the team members interact, structure their work, or view their contribution. And I think that's so valuable, because you might initially assume that for a team to be effective and powerful, what is needed is to have one or two star players, people on the team that are really, really good at their jobs. That's not the case. What they found was actually what was really important was how that team worked together. So here, I want to share something with you. I want you to have a little look at it. These were the 5 key factors that the Google research identified as being keys to successful teams. So you can see we've got 5 there: dependability, structure and clarity, meaning of work, so that the work personally was important to people, impact of work, and then psychological safety, so team members could take risks and make mistakes. Put in the chat box, which one do you think was the most important? One of these stood out when they did the research as being more significant than any of the others. If you had to choose one of these 5, which one do you think would be the most important? Number 4, dependability. We've got a few for dependability, psychological safety, impact, quite a mix. I think a few more of you are saying psychological safety. So obviously all of these are important. I mean, these are all key points, but the one actually that was identified as being the fundamentally most important was psychological safety. And we've got a definition here from Amy Edmondson, who's the one that really brought psychological safety to the fore in the late 90s with research that she did on nurses working in a hospital. So she found that psychological safety, unsurprisingly perhaps, was absolutely essential in terms of nurses being able to raise concerns, admit when they'd made mistakes, acknowledge when practices weren't working as effectively as they should be. And that was key, establishing this psychological safety and this opportunity for people to speak up, to raise concerns, make mistakes, was absolutely key to effectiveness in that environment. But many management and leadership consultants have gone on to discuss why it actually is essential for collaboration, for learning, for innovation in any team concept situation. And that's particularly the case when we're dealing with wicked problems and when we're dealing with these issues that are so complicated in this VUCA world. So I'd like to propose to you that this is something that we all should be thinking about in terms of building collaboration and ensuring that we're effective when working together. And I hope that some of you maybe are already familiar with this concept. I mean, certainly you can see that this is very applicable in the classroom as well as in the team environment or in the work environment. And some of you may have come across psychological safety in that context as well. So these are the questions that when Amy Edmondson was doing her work, she came up with a scale of questions to ask people. And they were asked to say whether they strongly agreed or disagreed with the statements listed here. And perhaps it's interesting for you to have a look and think about your own team experience. If you were thinking about your team now, about how your interactions are with your colleagues, or you might want to reflect about it in terms of thinking about being in your classroom. That's another scenario where it's really important. Think how you might rate these statements. Would you strongly agree with them, or would you disagree? And perhaps your answers could indicate and give you an idea of the level of psychological safety that you might have in your team, and where potentially there's room to do some work. And one of the criticisms that Amy Edmondson said she came across when she was talking about this was that people started to think that psychological safety was about being comfortable, that everybody should be nice to each other. And obviously it is important that we're nice to each other, but she wanted to make it clear that it's not just about that. It's also about challenging. It's also about stretching. It's about taking us out of our comfort zone. And so you can see on this diagram we have at the top left, we've got the comfort zone. So this is where people have high levels of psychological safety, but low performance. So they're very nice, they're very collegial, but they're not challenged. And so as a result, maybe as a team, they're not as effective as they could be. And then to the bottom right, we've got the anxiety zone. And this is what we definitely want to avoid. So people are really striving, they're working very hard, but they don't feel that psychological safety. They feel scared to try new ideas. They feel scared to put ideas forward because they feel personal risk when they do that. So obviously, ideally, what we want is the learning zone, where people feel that they can collaborate, they can really experiment, they can explore new ideas together. And that's where we get the really powerful innovation, problem-solving work done. And again, something that maybe we should be striving for in our classrooms as well as in our team interaction. So last of all, I just wanted to, summarize, how I think we can build this psychological safety in our teams. So as managers or as team leaders, I think first of all, we have to be honest about our own fallibility and about the gaps in our knowledge and our vulnerability. We have to lead by example there, and also recognize that having everyone's ideas and thoughts is far better when we're dealing with this uncertainty and complex problems. And we have to acknowledge team members that speak up and challenge us. And I know personally, if any of you are managers, it's very difficult sometimes when people do that, when you feel that you know the way of doing things and somebody questions that. It can make you feel vulnerable, it can make you feel uncomfortable. But actually, it's often those conversations that produce the most useful and interesting ways forward. And we need to make space for voices that aren't normally heard and give them the time and the encouragement to speak and be respectful. And I think last of all, we have to foster and encourage communication approaches that allow people to challenge each other, but in a kind and curious way. And I can't emphasize this enough. It's not about being super nice all the time. It's also not about being overly candid and rude under the pretense of psychological safety. And it's a fine line, but as teachers, I think we're well equipped to think about how to achieve that. And then as individuals, we can really make an effort ourselves to model this behavior. So to offer ideas, to share our thoughts, and to give real consideration to team members' views that may not fit with our worldview or may not fit with our way of doing things, and things that might challenge us, and actively listen with curiosity and a readiness to see another viewpoint. So I hope that I've convinced you that this is something really important, thinking about the future and thinking about the way forward in terms of how we can equip ourselves for dealing with uncertainty, and also that these approaches are very applicable to the classroom too. I think in summary, if I could say what I learned from my experience is that whatever the world throws at you, is that if you can build a good collaborative team, if you can work with other people, if you can find a way of making sure that you are gaining that collective intelligence, then that is one of the best tools that you can have in dealing with any situation. And here there's just a few links which give you some references to the content that I've talked about. Amy Edmondson, who's the one that's really, the expert and guru on this, and then also references to the Google team research. And they also have the bottom link is a really nice framework that you can use if you want to look at team effectiveness and building psychological safety in your organization. I think I have hit my time. So yes.
Lucy, thank you very much for such an interesting talk. I think there were so many different points that we can learn from, but from my perspective, the most interesting here was the idea that creativity and teamwork don't just happen, right? Sometimes people tell you, just work better as a team. but you actually have to do some research behind it and take actual action, not just tell people to work together. So we have a couple, well, we have one question and a comment here in the questions. One is just a comment that so many teachers had to innovate and immediately learn how to use Zoom or Meet. They had never seen that before the pandemic. So here, this is not a question, but congratulations to all the teachers for all your hard work during the pandemic. That was some incredibly difficult time. And we have a question from Gisela. She's asking your opinion on why it is that some areas like ministries of education and things like that are reluctant to allow people to continue working online, not in classes, but to do the teamwork, to do, creativity through teamwork and things like that.
So, sorry, just so people that don't work in schools, that administrators or people that work in different roles, why people are reluctant to let them to do online working. I think it's a bit the same as what we were talking about, that it's easy to stick with what's familiar, isn't it? And people tend to return to what they know. And there's probably a misconception that more work gets done when people are together. But I think what I've learned from researching and reading about this is, and also from experiencing it for 2 years, is that you can be incredibly effective online, working online in the same way that you can be face-to-face. And actually what it comes down to is how you work and the systems that you use and how you communicate and how you measure performance and all of these things. That's what matters. I think there is absolute value in being face-to-face sometimes, but I certainly am a big fan of hybrid working because I think that provides a good balance.
I think connecting this to Nik's talk on design thinking, one of the phrases that usually kill creativity is, that's how we've always done it, right? And I think that now that the pandemic is finishing, people want to go back to how we've always done things. And it might be good sometimes, but you have to look into it a little bit more, right? There's a second question here, which I think the answer is obvious, but I would like you to expand on it, whether these work besides the classroom, right? Just for also all the other areas, all of this teamwork and making sure that things work together. I think you already mentioned a lot of this in the talk itself, but I would like to give you a chance to reiterate that a little bit.
I mean really my study of it on the course has very much been in the workplace environment, so in the office environment, in any kind of work scenario. It's just that we have the privilege as teachers of knowing that actually it transfers very well to the classroom, but certainly my most people's experience and Amy Edmondson, what she was writing about and is about in the work context.
All right. And one last question before I let you go, which I think is a very interesting question. It says, do you think that virtual learning is conducive to independent learning or autonomous learning, as usually I call it?
As opposed to face-to-face learning?
Yeah, like the idea here, I think, is whether students are going to slowly become more autonomous thanks to learning online. Or whether they will always need some hand-holding.
Yeah, I think the role of the teacher is always going to be essential, personally. I mean, the degree of facilitation or support that comes from a teacher might vary from learner to learner, but this is not actually something new, because if we think 10 years ago, some people were learning languages, from a book or from a cassette, so that actually hasn't changed as significantly as we might think. I think some people still like to learn in a collaborative way, and certainly that would be my preference and what I would advocate. And there are other people that have always preferred to do things autonomously and will continue to do so.
You've just taken me back like 20 years or 25 years. When I was a kid, my dad had like big cassettes to learn English, German, and French. He speaks like 2 words of German and 0 words of French. So I'm not sure how effective that was. But
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Lucy. This has been very informative, very inspiring as well. I hope that all the teachers who have attended and coordinators, etc., will now have a little bit more teamwork at their workplaces. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lovely to talk to everybody. And thank you, everybody, for attending.
Now, remember, please, that within a week's time, you will be receiving your certificate and your virtual goodie bag for attending today. If you attended through Facebook or through LinkedIn, remember that you should be registering through Zoom to be able to get your virtual certificate. Also, the Global Teachers Festival is not done yet. We have 3 more days. The last day, Friday the 24th, we'll have 2 amazing talks promoting interculturality in ELT through cultural diversity by Dr. Amina Douidi and Changing the World One Step at a Time by Harry Waters, which I think that is what all teachers want to do, right? Change the world. We have just different ways of doing it, and we'll see Harry's perspective this Friday. So thank you very much. This is the end for today. We have day 7 of the Global Teachers Festival. Remember, if you only caught part of it, we have another session in a couple of hours and 3 more days of the Global Teachers Festival. My name is Juan Gonzalo Iwasaki from Macmillan, Peru. Thank you and see you later. Thank you, Lucy. I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.